Be empty, that is all. The perfect man uses his mind like a mirror, going after nothing, welcoming nothing, responding but not storing. Therefore, he can win out over things and not hurt himself. How should I live my life in a world where everything around me seems out of control? Which of the alternate paths should I take as my guide? Why is it that I come to choose one course over another, and how do I choose a path? Because there are many different ways to see the same thing. Why do I, and why should I, see things the way I do, and not another way? Questions that Zhuangzi faced are indeed among the most fundamental human problems, and something that we have been attempting to find the answer for thousands of years. In this lecture, and in future lectures, we will attempt to tackle these questions by studying a bit further on Zhuangzi, whom we have briefly mentioned in the last video, and someone who, among many other great philosophers that have mostly been ignored by the Western audience, we will do so by analyzing some of his logical reasoning processes a bit further and what answers he arrived at. However, to understand his reasoning and his answers, we must first understand his life's context and the environment of his life in which he grew up, as well as the important information about the book Zhuangzi, which we will be doing deeper analysis in later videos. We must also clarify some misconceptions that people have with Zhuangzi and Taoism because of misinterpretations of loosely translated concepts, or because the speakers that people hear from simply did not study enough that they are not aware of the biases of the translators and interpreters. Although Zhuangzi's Taoism is in many ways different from that expounded in the Tao Te Ching, and his book is considered as the most important of all the Taoist writings, and acclaimed to be more comprehensive than Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi is less known by Western non-scholars than Tao Te Ching. However, his role in shaping Chinese history and culture cannot be overstated, for his philosophy of the usefulness of the uselessness and philosophy of life has given mental solace many intellectuals in Chinese history. Every major Chinese writer or poet in history was deeply imbued with the ideas and artistry of the Zhuangzi. His approach to life has also had a profound influence on Chinese landscape painting, and the messages in the book played a pivotal role in assimilating Buddhism into Chinese culture after it was first brought over to China from India in the 1st century CE. Like many other philosophers before the Common Era and their works, we know very little about Zhuangzi except that he lived in the state of Song from the period of 399 BCE to 295 BCE, regardless of the exact details of his life. What we can gather from his life is that, like many other classical Chinese philosophers, he lived during a time of great social instability, when warfare was constant, and famine and death were everyday events. During this period, it was easily possible to receive harsh and unreasonable punishments from tyrannical kings based solely on their whims. Zhuangzi expressed his philosophical thinking through fables, fairy tales, or stories that are mostly fantastic and fanciful. Yet, these examples often included stories of those whose limbs were cut off and whose foreheads were branded, because of how difficult it was just to live out one's natural years without harm. There was a heavy, serious, and war-oriented side to his stories behind his joking and comedic tone that can be seen on its face value. Therefore, our important job as readers and learners of the Zhuangzi is to capture the whole picture of Zhuangzi's philosophical outlook and to reorganize his different strands into a coherent theory, and not just a simple self-help version of his philosophy. Before we move forward on taking a closer look at his ideas, as serious readers and learners, we must first understand the nature of the work of the Zhuangzi. In the complete works collected in the Zhuangzi, there are 33 chapters. The first 7 are identified as the inner chapters, while the next 15 chapters are classified as the outer chapters, and the remaining 11 are assorted as the miscellaneous chapters. The consensus among the philosophers and the scholars is that the inner chapters were written by Zhuangzi, while the outer chapters were written by his followers. The miscellaneous chapters are considered as not affiliated with him or his followers, and thus often discredited, while some commentators claim that several passages could also be attributed to Zhuangzi. Because of his loquacity and his lightheartedness, it is not clear to the readers which of his comments are serious and which are meant for ironies. Therefore, the zhuangzi is subjected to a wide array of opposing interpretations, with each interpreter citing sufficient texts for their claim.